Has someone ever challenged you to something that they didn't know who are an expert at? If so, how did it turn out for you then? Wasn't me, but there's a story about an old geotechnical engineer who used to work for the company I work for. Several senior staff had to attend a meeting with the client and some government regulatory staff who were being awkward and not approving the design. This geotech guy is pretty much quiet the whole meeting. Throughout the discussion, the government guy keeps referencing this research document and shooting down anything anybody suggests. Near the end of the meeting, geotech asks government guy if he has the research paper with him. He responds yes and places it on the table. Geotech asks government guy who is the author of the paper. Then slides over a business card. Turns out it's geotech's own paper that government guy has been referencing to defend his argument. Government guy went bright red and apparently approved the design the same day. Thus graduated as a teacher, and I've been working as a casual relief teacher. I play lacrosse, which is a small sport already and even smaller here in Australia. I tried out for the last World Cup team and made it to the final cut. I was team teaching with another teacher who worked at the school. Before the period he spoke to me and said, "Hey mate, we are doing lacrosse today. It's a bit of an odd sport and hard to teach, so just wait over there and then you can just help with supervision and discipline." Then walked off. Being a CRT from an agency, didn't really know how to speak to him speak up. I tried to speak to him and say that I played, but he didn't give me a second, so I just listened and did my thing. Few minutes into the start of the lesson I grabbed a stick and ball and just started to work my around the class, giving them pointers and hints. The way he was teaching was completely incorrect and I didn't want to say anything, so when the kids broke off into groups, I kinda just taught them correctly. He pulled me over at a drinks break and asked how I knew so much could perform the skills. I told him how I play lacrosse and my playing history. He asked why I didn't speak up and say anything, and I said I tried to tell him. Anyway, I ended up running the rest of the class and even ended up sitting down with him and going through the correct and easier way to teach the game and skills. The local mall had a portable climbing wall with a make it to the top and win $100 side. The route was actually pretty challenging. As I walked by, the guy asked me if I'd like to try. "Nobody has made it to the top. You think you can do it, buddy?" At the time I was ranked top 12 climber in my age group and kind of laughed to myself. After taking my $100 I then proceeded to call the rest of my climbing team and one by one they went to the mall and claimed their $100. After the fourth person the guy got suspicious and took the sign down. We later told him we were all nationally ranked competition climbers and he got a good laugh. The company who owned the rentals was the one who lost the money, he just worked the booth and wasn't the one who lost the prize money. My wife and I were taking an evening cruise for adults in Portsmouth Bay. The ship drove around the shipyard where my submarine and several others were stationed. My wife and I are having a quiet drink when a really loud know-it-all starts spouting misinformation about each submarine we are driving by. Calling them all the wrong class, wrong names, etc. When he literally points to my submarine and says, "And that is a 637 class," my wife finally speaks up and says, "Actually that is a 688. The guy gets all gruff and says, "Well, how would you know?" My wife smiles, hugs my arm and says sweetly, "That's my husband's submarine, it is the Minneapolis St. Paul, SNN 708. He turned beet red while his date laughed. It was my first weapons qualification with a National Guard unit I had just transferred to. A lot of NG soldiers only shoot a rifle once a year for qualification. A soldier in the platoon I took over was joking about how lieutenants are bad at basic soldier tasks, trying to get me worked up. He bet I couldn't shoot better than him. We're not supposed to bet, so I declined any wager, but I did accept the challenge. I hit 40/40ths like I always do, he hit the minimum, 23/40ths. He basically bet I wouldn't qualify. I've worked in the firearms industry my whole civilian career and have focused on rifle and long-range shooting as my main hobby and have shot competitively. His excuses were hilarious, his sight wasn't working, he couldn't get a good position, blah blah blah. I put him on a few details for being a poor sport. Some Japanese client that studied in France asked me for a translation job but wanted to change all my sentences to prove she was better than me at my own mother tongue. She ended up writing something grammatically correct, but that sounded so horribly sexual that if you tried and googled the terms you would only find porn and erotic novels. I had to tell my boss she was forcing me to write porn because it was for a mascara brand that was supposed to be sold in France, so he could stop her, and after that she stopped trying to best me. I'm really good at archery. My friend and I rented him a bow at the local range and he wanted to bet me beers for every round. I told him repeatedly, "No, you will not win." He could probably get lucky if we did 1-arrow shoot-offs, but he wanted to do proper 3-arrow rounds. He insisted. I drank for free all night. I hope you took a bow after that excellent performance. Shotgunning beers. He lost and wanted a second go. Then proceeded to fall down after second round loss. Went with a big group of college students to a bar. I was challenged by a cute little girl, and by that I mean she was maybe 95 pounds, 4'11", to a drink contest with a pint of beer. I'm 6'1", 200 pounds, so I just chuckled and agreed to it. It seems like I had just enough time to tilt my head back to start chugging when I hear her empty glass hit the table. Turns out she had the ability to just open her throat and pour the beer down. We dated for about 6 months after that. Seriously. My nephew challenged me to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate once. I was visiting Kyoto a couple years ago. I'm an American, and my wife and I walked into a tiny bar which had 5 people in suits laughing and talking in Japanese. We instantly knew that this was not a tourist bar and felt pretty out of place. The bartender spoke the most English, so I asked him what his favorite shochu was, and things got a little more comfortable as we drank, and the whole bar tried to talk to us. Someone mentioned Mario Kart, and I said yeah, so the bartender points to an old Super Famicom in the corner, and apparently I have accepted the challenge. I smiled to myself and my wife thinks it's funny because I used to have some skill at this game. Bartender selects battle mode, and the guy is fucking phenomenal. I haven't played in a few years and he buries me in less than a minute. The whole bar is laughing and I'm a little stunned. We're on to the second of 3 rounds. I destroy him. 3 balloons to 0. Everyone cheers except the bartender. 2 shots were put in front of me and I throw one down. Round 3. We're down to 1 balloon each and I swear it's the longest battle round of all time. I'm sweating. Shell, dodge, I have him in my sights and I fire. I miss, the shell bounces off the wall and I self-KO. The crowd goes wild. So that's the story of how a self-proclaimed Mario Kart expert embarrassed himself and his country in a small bar in Kyoto. We drank a lot and made a lot of great friends that night that we'll never see again. Edit for some photo evidence. Link.
Thanks for watching. I would highly appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe.